without the government support, I cannot stay maybe a month or 2 months.
Pima County Chairman Rex Scott told News for Tucson he's deeply concerned about the impact on local refugees.
Isn't it so funny how they constantly claim these people are not receiving government benefits, and then here these people are complaining that they're no longer receiving government benefits? Because who you just heard from is a quote-unquote refugee or asylum seeker from Iraq by the name of Bakr Rajab, apparently complaining in a public hearing in the United States of America that due to the government shutdown and the cutting off of SNAP and food stamp benefits which he is receiving, he may no longer be able to afford his life in the United States and might have to leave. Are you thinking exactly what I'm thinking? Okay, good, then go. Why exactly is it that you, as a guest in this country, instead of choosing to work or self-sustain as a grateful refugee, you know, this country took you in, maybe I should show respect, instead spent so many years grifting and living off of the American taxpayer? Simultaneously, what kind of insane system or unserious country would set up an immigration system to actively bankrupt itself? You know, we hear all this talk about how immigrants are our strength. Immigrants are necessary for the economy. That's the myth. And then in reality, what are we witnessing? Actually, immigration, in many ways that we'll talk about today, is actually bankrupting the country. The last thing I'd like to point out about this so-called refugee is that, do you know the legal definition of a refugee? It is someone who temporarily goes to another place in order to flee war or violence, okay? It is not a permanent basis. That's not the same as an immigrant, right? Legally speaking, a refugee and even an asylum seeker, different than immigration itself. So why are you still here? Another question I have. Were you fleeing Saddam Hussein? Well, he's been out of power for about 20 years now. Were you fleeing ISIS? Okay, they're no longer active in Iraq. Iraq, as a matter of fact, is starting to become somewhat of a stable country. So again, why are you still here? Why are any of these refugees, quote unquote, still here? Well, lots of questions that need to be answered in today's video. But I have to say, I do think that one of the many gifts that Democrats handed us through this government shutdown was not just the fact that they imploded and made themselves look like idiots, which they are. It's not just the fact that they gave Trump a blank check to fire a bunch of federal workers and cut down the government, which apparently they were trying to oppose. But, you know, that wasn't all that smart. But it's also the way in which, due to their constant screeching about things like the SNAP program, even though, again, they're the ones who shut down the government, they've actually started this massive conversation on the right wing about the widespread abuse of SNAP. And the deeper you go on this, the deeper you realize, again, like, our country is literally being bankrupted in order to sell you two lies. First of all, they're allowing millions of even American citizens to, yes, grift off of the taxpayer, not work. And then as a result of it, what do? They say Americans aren't around to work these jobs, therefore we need illegal immigration, therefore let's pour the borders over to a bunch of migrant guest workers. And then what if I told you on top of that, those people are also receiving the same government benefits, and this rabbit hole goes extremely, extremely deep. Well, we got a lot to tell you about here today in terms of the number of both immigrant households and even illegal alien, by the way, is the proper term, but, you know, let's be clear about that, but legal and illegal, but still, the whole point is what? Non-native born citizens who were brought to this country, right? The premise of that being, hey, you are going to contribute to the economy, right? It should be a very common sense policy. If someone's immigrating to this country, maybe they should be a tax positive, not a tax negative, right? That seems like the most basic starting of policy, basic foundation, right? And there should be other considerations. Who is this person? How do they benefit the culture? Are they going to assimilate to the culture? Where are they coming from? What are they? But, you know, that's all secondary. I think first and foremost, yeah, it should be like very basic common sense. We shouldn't have to pay for the immigrant. The immigrant should pay for us. After all, it's our country. They're coming here as a guest. That is not the case. Ladies and gentlemen, the point I'm making is what here? The SNAP and welfare fraud in our country runs so deep. We've been talking a lot about, right, it coming from American citizens. It gets even worse than that. And then, of course, right, in their brilliant wisdom, what are Democrats doing? By bringing so much attention to this issue, they've made us realize something very, very important. And I think, frankly, If they do another reconciliation package like Big Beautiful Bill, this needs to be first and forefront. No non-native born person, I would even say that in the United States, should be receiving SNAP. At the very least, no non-citizen should be receiving SNAP, but we'll get into it, guys. First though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Not only the best way to support our work, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And again, I want to show you how deep this SNAP migration fraud rabbit hole goes by, first of all, pointing out recent comments, for instance, made by Hakeem Jeffries, claiming that no illegal aliens are receiving these government benefits because it's quote-unquote against the law, which is simply not true. But first, take a listen, and then we'll check that with reality.
The current law, undocumented immigrants are already ineligible for Medicaid, the ACA exchanges, and for SNAP benefits. Not a single undocumented immigrant in this country gets a dime in federal taxpayer dollars for any part of comprehensive Medicaid coverage. Not one.
Yeah, well, needless to say, as you may have witnessed in America, but if you needed the full confirmation, that is simply not true.
Over the last few months, we have proven that there's been over $1 billion. That's a billion with a B. It's a lot of money. It's not a rounding error. $1 billion paid by U.S. taxpayers for illegal immigrants in about half a dozen states. And we're just getting started. So it's going to be significantly more money than that.
Yes, and that should be common sense. Because although federal law technically does exist and got stricter under one big beautiful bill, guess what we know we have in this country? Sanctuary states. And while Medicaid is a federal program, it is often administered through the states. I know for a fact because we've talked about it on the channel, right? Medi-Cal, which is California's version of that, gives billions of dollars to illegal aliens. As a matter of fact, Medi-Cal is going bankrupt because of it, which is a trend you're going to see time and time again, right? You wonder why this country is going broke and you are reaping the consequences of it. It actually comes all the way back to this migration issue. But before we get ahead of ourselves, I like to point out that even some Democrat congressmen have accidentally had to admit, actually, Medicaid, SNAP, all of these things really do go to illegal aliens, but it's just a small amount. Oh, so you mean to tell me it actually is happening? Not a single one, you said? Oh, it turns out it's more than a single one.
In terms of healthcare, the reality is they're just not being honest. The amount of money that actually is going towards people who are undocumented is such a small portion of the Medicaid cuts or the Affordable Care Act, if at all. And so we can argue that point, but the reality that even the vice president would acknowledge, that anyone who looks at the numbers will acknowledge, is 90 to 95% of the funding we're talking about is talking about funding for American citizens.
Pretty interesting admission there from Democrat Congressman Ro Khanna, is that not? We went from 0 illegal aliens receive government benefits to now, oh, it's just a few of them. Oh, it's just like 2 to 5%, no big deal. Wait, but hold on. You just said it was 0, and now you're admitting actually illegal aliens do receive these benefits. But the excuse there is what? Well, when it comes to Medicaid, when it comes to SNAP, all of these programs, that amount is fairly minuscule. So all you Republicans and conservatives are fighting a ghost or a straw man of an issue to misrepresent our greater point. Except, as you can see where this is going, that's just also not true. As a matter of fact, I want to bring you an older story from 2024 that highlights just how much in SNAP and SNAP-style government benefits were given out, not even just to illegal aliens of mixed status households or the ones who have been here like 30 years and they managed to figure out how to get a temporary protective status or something. No, even the Biden migrants who just came over the border, just how much money they were receiving in free food benefits from the Biden administration. But again, guys, it's just a small amount. Oh, wait.
Each migrant will get approximately $12.52 per day to purchase food and baby supplies. That's about 40% more than what the average low-income American gets in this country on government food stamps or SNAP benefits in 2022, which was about $7.59 per person per day. To put in other words, that $53 million that's being used for this prepaid debit program is double what the New York State is budgeting in 2025 for its Department of Veterans Services, its Office of National and Community Service, its Division of Human Rights, and...
Right, so when they tell us that illegal aliens and foreign immigrants are not receiving the same amount of government benefits as native-born U.S. citizens, I guess in a sense they actually are correct. Because as you'll come to find out, and this is the most shocking aspect of it all, they receive more than native-born citizens. See, you've been lied to about this entire issue. First of all, they told you it wasn't happening. Now they're basically trying to downplay it. It's a tiny amount. You know, what's really the big deal? But again, that's actually not true. Actually, as a matter of fact, foreigners and illegal aliens, what if I told you this? On this SNAP issue and other welfare programs in America, according to a recent study by CIS, right, Center for Immigration Studies, no, the answer is actually more. They receive more welfare than native-born citizens. That's how deep this rabbit hole goes. And again, I would just like to thank the Democrat Party for putting this issue at the forefront. As you can see, the way they measured this and found out is that they broke it down on 3 levels, right? So households headed by a U.S.-born native citizen, households headed by a legal immigrant, and households headed by an illegal alien. By the way, this is a major way in which illegal aliens do receive the government benefits, just to clarify to the Democrats. Even if they are not personally receiving them, right? You do it through their kids, through the spouse or something like that, and in the end, the whole household is getting the EBT or SNAP or Medicaid or whatever it is. Just to clarify, that's how the vast majority of the time this happens, and that's why, of course, this is so relevant. Well, folks, take a look at these numbers. So first of all, on any welfare program, right? What percentage of households are on any amount of welfare? The answer is, guess what? 39% of U.S. native-born citizen households, only 39% are on any welfare program. 52%, check this out, of legal immigrants, even the legal ones, right? So that's why it's also interesting. We talk about illegal migration a lot, and I think that case is very cut and dry because they broke the law, right? But I think there also needs to be a serious conversation about legal immigration in terms of, you know, first of all, again, on the most basic level, there are other conversations to be had about culture, and I think a lot of ways that's abused too, that system, but very basic level, right? Even through the legal system. Why are you bringing people into this country who are going to be a tax negative on you? That is a way to bankrupt yourself, right? It'd be like a business, hiring and putting on salary hundreds and thousands of workers who don't work, or they are generating less work than they are profit. And instead of being a good businessman and saying, okay, well, we need to lay these people off or not hire them to begin with, let's bring in even more. Let's keep hiring people who are actually losing us money and then be so shocked when we're bankrupt, right? Why are we $40 trillion in debt? The answer actually is much simpler than people make it out to be. It all ties actually back to this migration issue. And that's why I say you've been lied to, right? On so many levels. You say, oh, the country is going downhill because of, you know, this issue or this law that was passed 20 years ago. No. Everything in this country can be tied back to migration. Every single problem we face right now. But I'll explain that more in a second. Okay, so 52% of legal immigrant households. Of illegal headed households, right? So it's the household is ran by an illegal. Maybe the wife is a, legal. Maybe the kids are, but still, this is an illegal alien household. 59% are on at least one welfare program. Oh, they're not receiving as much as American citizens. Actually, they're receiving substantially more. You were lied to, guys. Here's where it gets deeper, right? So of cash benefits, again, only 16% of native-born citizens receive cash benefits. 23% legal immigrants receive cash benefits. 18% illegal alien households, cash benefits, okay? In every single case you notice, right? The native-born U.S. citizens are taking substantially less from the system, right? They're the ones contributing. They're the ones paying the taxes so that not that they can get benefits back, so that it can go to illegal aliens and foreign immigrants. It's just shocking. It really is shocking. Hopefully this helps you rethink like every problem we have in America, because that's what it's done to me, I've been an immigration hawk for years, but really seeing the way this actually works, you realize, again, every single issue actually is tied back to immigration that we face as a country. Okay. Food benefits, aka, oh, what is this one? What is this one? SNAP benefits. They say this is not going to illegals. Only 25% of U.S. citizens, native born, receiving SNAP. 34% of legal immigrants receiving SNAP. Again, how is that possible, right? 48%, ladies and gentlemen, of illegal alien-headed households are receiving food stamps. Other studies, by the way, show similar things, right? This is from data as of 2012, and this does not differentiate between illegals and legals, but still, right? It doesn't matter. Native-born versus immigrant. Of any welfare program, only 30% of native-born citizens are receiving it. 51% of legal immigrants are receiving it, right? Medicaid, food, cash welfare, it just goes on and on. Every single issue, you realize that the people coming into this country, whether legally or illegally, on net, on average, are taking more from the system than they are putting in. And again, I ask, okay, you wonder why the country has not gotten more prosperous. Notice how nothing in our country has gotten better ever since we kind of created a more loose and open immigration system, whether that's through legal or illegal. Notice how it's kind of mysterious. We claim they're contributing to the economy, but the economy feels like every year it gets worse, right? Where's the growth? Where's the productivity? Why does it feel like things have become stagnant? Oh, maybe because of this right here. By the way, what if we broke that down by ethnicity? Here's another very interesting study. You'll find out the percentage of U.S. households receiving those SNAP benefits, okay? And going back to that Iraq refugee, right? 45% of Afghan migrant households are on SNAP benefits, 42% Somali, 34% Iraqi, right? By the way, compare that to native-born citizens, only 27%. So all of these groups, again, individually, Afghans, Afghan, Somali, even Iraq, right? Close to half of all the households are on these benefits. And again, you wonder why our country is going broke. It's shocking. It really is.
There are 42 million people in this country that need food stamps on a weekly basis. And we're saying people deliberately instead of Americans because most of the people that are on food stamps aren't even from this country. 45% of Afghanistan immigrants are on food stamps, 42% of Somali immigrants, 34% of every immigrant from Iraq, 23% of Haitians, 59% of all illegal aliens are collecting food stamps, meaning that most of the people getting food stamps from the U.S. government and the U.S. taxpayer are not even Americans. Think about that. And we didn't know about any of this before the government shutdown started. But thanks to Democrats, we can confirm tonight that millions of Joe Biden illegal aliens, people who crossed the border when Joe was president, are now collecting food stamps from a program funded by hardworking American taxpayers.
You know, in the past couple of days when we were talking about this EBT SNAP issue, we framed it a lot around welfare queens and grifters, right? Mainly U.S. citizens who are just taking advantage of the system. They don't want to work. They're just frauding it, you know, and it's incentivizing poverty. And don't get me wrong, I'm not suddenly changing my mind on that. I'm not suddenly saying that we shouldn't crack down on it because we still should. But part of me almost feels like I owe all of those ridiculous American citizens an apology. Because when you really break it down, as ridiculous and lazy as they are, they're not even the problem. No. Actually, the real problem in this country has come from the migrant invasion, right? It's come from illegal aliens, even legal, quote unquote, immigrants or migrants who came here through very screwed up and backwards U.S. immigration policies and technically can say they have legal status. But no, I'm sorry, I can't buy that anymore, right? I believe if you are a tax negative in this country and you immigrated at any point in your life from a foreign country, and, you know, it's not like you're naturalized citizen, you're working here for many years, and you injured yourself, you're disabled. Okay, that means one exception, right? But besides that, then you should go home. You should actually be deported as well, right? Because the whole point of the immigration system was supposed to be, the lie we were told is that it's for the benefit of the people already living there. After all, number one purpose, it should be common sense, yes, of an immigration system, is it should be a net benefit to the people already living in the country, but instead it goes backwards. And this is why, frankly, ladies and gentlemen, I have to say this. In 2025, I have basically become a single issue voter on the topic of immigration, right? It's almost to me like the only issue that really matters, if I'm gonna be honest with you. And I'll tell you why, because you can bring up other stuff. But when you really think about it, every single problem in America, every single political or cultural debate is downstream of immigration. To put it very shortly, there is no purpose in debating economics or culture or social policy or foreign policy even if the American citizenry do not even have a country that belongs to them. Understand what I'm saying there, right? So when conservatives, for instance, ask, why do we pay so much in taxes and yet our country is fiscally struggling and in so much debt? The answer is simple: immigration. Even to the progressives, by the way, right? You wonder why we can't have free healthcare and a burgeoning social welfare state. You know, why can't we have the Canadian or Western European model? Well, I'd ask you the same question. Why are the Canadian and Western European models now failing? Immigration. Do you understand this? There are certain political issues that are literally irrelevant to debate if you have open borders, because it doesn't matter. They're going to crash and burn either freaking way, okay? Young people wonder why they can't afford a home. Major reason. Actually, when you break it down by the math, even bigger than the BlackRock thing is immigration. Saw a recent study, by the way, of the amount of FHA loans that are going to H-1B visa temporary migrants, okay? Legal quote-unquote immigrants, but many of these are the guest workers that come over from India and other places to take American jobs. Overwhelming, disproportionate, because all the FHA, right? Government subsidized, meant for first-time home buyers, meant so that Americans can pursue the American dream, being hoarded and taken up by H-1B visa holders. And again, you wonder why there's such a real estate problem in this country. Immigration is central to everything, even to, say, the pro-life abortion activists, right? I'll give you something as well, right? You wonder why more of this country is not pro-life. You wonder why it's so hard to move politics on this issue. Still ties back to the fact that the Democrats have basically imported en masse a voter base that at the very least will serve as a stonewall for this country from truly going in a socially conservative direction, which is another great point to be made about the culture, right? In order to actually have social conservatism naturally breeds as a byproduct of political nationalism, right? The nationalism has to come first, or else what are you socially conserving? You don't even have a society. So that's why I say, right, this is so important. This should be the one issue everyone else thinks about, And if Trump, under this administration, can fix the immigration problem, you will have your country back. If he doesn't, it doesn't freaking matter, right? And I'm rooting for him for sure, right? But if he doesn't, it doesn't matter how much the economy grows. It doesn't matter what the national debt is. It doesn't matter what foreign war we're even in. If you do not solve, or not in, right? If you do not solve immigration, you do not have a country. And I hope this video is helping you to realize that. By the way, this is not a problem exclusive to America. There was recently a study conducted in the Netherlands by IZA, which I believe is a German-based firm. But check this out. Lifetime contribution in the Netherlands and Western Europe, right, per immigrant. North American immigrants. This is basically, are you tax positive, tax negative? How much do you contribute to the economy, right? North American immigrants, mainly from the United States or Canada, right, expats over there, during their lifetime, contributed a net positive of $573,000, Scandinavia, $557, Oceania, Australia, New Zealand, $476, Japan, $525, UK, $481,000 plus, right? So all the immigrants from here on average are contributing more to the economy than they're taking out. But in Somalia, for instance, or migrants, I should say, from Somalia, the average Somali migrant in the Netherlands is a net tax negative of $1.1 million on the economy. Literal, and by the way, you wonder, let me ask this right now, right? Politically incorrect, but it's true, I guess. Do you think there are more migrants in Western Europe coming from Somalia or from the United States and UK and Scandinavia and Japan? We know the answer. And again, you wonder over there, right? This is why I say the free market versus progressive, democratic socialism, that debate doesn't matter, because either way, the system's going to fail if you open the freaking borders. Case in point. This right here, right? You wonder why their wonderful free healthcare is not working so well anymore. There you go. From the Caribbean, minus 675,000. Middle East, minus 624,000. Latin America, minus 271,000. Sub-Saharan Africa, minus 730,000. Central and North Africa, minus 700,000. So in other words, right, migration, yes, is literally bankrupting Western countries. The whole talking point, you have been told that our economy needs these immigrants. Actually, it's the opposite. Our economy cannot survive with these immigrants. Literally, right? so eye-opening, and I hope it is. By the way, you want any case study of the lie you've been sold, just compare Poland and the UK, okay? So Poland, as is infamously known, has a very strict immigration policy. They don't accept refugees from, the Islamic world. Very tight-knit, The UK, we know all about that. And, I wouldn't say it's the only factor, because sure, the Poland has slightly lower taxes and more free markets, I guess, than the UK. But again, these debates don't really matter. The UK, for many decades, has had like kind of socialistic free healthcare, all this stuff. But since 2019, right, keep in mind the social theory, immigrants improve the economy. Poland's GDP has grown by 19%. The UK has grown by 1%. By 2030, the nation of Poland will now be projected as wealthier than the UK, and they did that without immigration. Why is that? Again, it's actually quite simple, right? Because everything you were taught by the globalists on the subject is a big, gigantic lie. And there you go. I hope your eyes were as opened as I was. If you ask me, obviously it should be common sense, right? Deport illegal aliens and obviously prioritize the worst of the worst. But yes, anyone who's an illegal alien in this country should be subject to deportation, and understand, right? En masse, even if they didn't mean it, they are responsible for the destruction of the American dream. Okay, so I'd say that, but I go one step further. I think I said this before though, but every visa that was issued by the Biden administration in the last 4 years needs to be immediately reviewed. Okay, I think there's massive fraud here going on, and that should be a new immigration policy. If you are here and you are taking more from the government than you're putting in, deport it. Doesn't matter if you have legal status. Get you out of the country. You don't belong here, right? That should be it should be the most basic premise. Before you get into culture and assimilation and other things, yeah, you should be a tax positive on the country if you're going to be immigrating here. I'd do that as well. I'd further, right? Number 3, even say that I think given all the problems we're facing right now as a country, maybe we should have like a net zero policy on immigration, right? Like 1 in, 1 out, right? If people leave, then you can come in, like a full nightclub, okay? But obviously the legal immigration system needs serious reform, net zero moratorium, something like that. But yeah, I mean, it's just totally broken, okay? That's your American dream. You wonder where it went? It went right here. Real answer. All right, that said though, guys, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.